I know this is a bit delayed while it's in the present tense. But remember, this is a general address in the future tense. Post-occupied, Duwamish, capital, Taylor Hill. You have no idea what it took to withstand the barrage and assault was conducted. This was an assault like no other on the West Coast. The best coast is the West Coast. This was an assault, an all-out campaign by, well, treacherous forces. And they really despise with a passion the upper left coast. Currently occupies the Duwamish territory. You see, climate change adversely impacts residents and citizens of the West Coast. Yes, it affects the East Coast, the Midwest, the Rocky Mountains, and certainly the South. But you almost never hear about the effects outside of a large wildfire or forest fire. The effects of climate change on the West Coast. You know, it's unheard of, unfathomable to have triple-digit weather during the summer on the West Coast. But it's been the norm for the last couple of years now. And going forward, you can expect that to be the norm. You didn't used to need a central air conditioner to live on the West Coast. It's called climate change. Whether you want to have prehistoric dinosaurs who walk in suits and ties, acknowledge that or not, climate change is real. You didn't used to have 14 inches of snow in the wintertime on the West Coast, especially in Southern California or Hawaii. Hawaii you would go to for warm weather during Christmas. This past Christmas, Hawaii had a hailstorm and 8 inches of snow. You have to bundle up in Hawaii nowadays. And people still want to pretend at this point that climate change doesn't exist. West Coast has dealt with Mother Nature's fury, largely due to man-made catastrophes. And then we had the pandemic. You know, back in April, the first case of COVID-19 within this county and the entire nation. It started nearby at a nursing home. We were the beginning, the epicenter, and we weathered that storm to become the best in the nation in terms of how we've managed this. From epicenter to best in under 1 year. You gotta look to us. But in the midst of the pandemic, the virus, the invisible enemy, there was another enemy that's been amongst us, but well, sort of kind of hidden in the shadows as well. It was a pandemic of racism, bigotry, hatred, xenophobia, homophobia. Basically, fear itself. Pandemic induced by fear. Now, you can say that that element has been amongst us as a country for a long period of time, and you wouldn't be incorrect. But that element has long been, well, hidden under a rock, so to speak. And every once or so often, in polite company, maybe they would share something that was, well, distasteful to say the least. It definitely didn't go viral. And it definitely wasn't done daily. But you had a certain cult-like figure who wanted to morph himself into Hitler 2.0 and wanted to be a totalitarian nitwit in governance over us. And I didn't see it fit to continue with the same clown and the same clown show. So as you can recall and remember, the very first and only reason this production began was to remove Donald John Trump from the presidency of the United States of America. That was the very first episode, us voting. That's why I said voting is essential. Without voting, you can't be a comedian. You can't be a politician. You can't do anything without voting. Because voting is about your representation. Who you, as a citizen, want to represent over you. And say, this person shares the values of this community, of this neighborhood, of this particular area. That's why you got to be very careful when you select somebody to, well, represent you. Because when they say something, they're saying it on behalf of you, the community that they're representing. When I hear Marjorie Taylor Greene or Madison Cawthorn or Lauren Boebert speak, they don't represent anything, even remotely, that I can attach on to and go, I can kind of agree with that. They represent bigotry, racism, homophobia. They represent everything. Animus to our belief system and our worldview. So you can imagine when these individuals talk about us, But they don't talk about us individually. That's not how they do it. They talk about us collectively. Now, why do they speak about us collectively, but we speak about them individually? Let me explain. You see, if you don't have the principles that undergird what they believe in, then you collectively are opposed to them. Us, we look at it as, you don't have the principles as an individual, so we oppose you as an individual. We don't oppose your entire community, where you come from. I never talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional district and the people she represents. I talk about her. But when they go and speak, they say, look at those socialists in Seattle. As though everybody in Seattle is a socialist. Here's where I have to say thank you. These fascists, white supremacists, tried to organize in District 3 and tried to have a recall. You know, just like they did in California for the governor's race, where they tried to recall and put in an extremist, a fringe Donald Trump 2.0 candidate in Larry Elders. And you saw the gorilla woman. She threw the egg at Larry Elders. And I said, he's going to get trounced because the homeless community, the unhoused community, weren't putting up with what Larry Elders was putting down. They come and they talk about how they want to solve the problem that they created. I told you, they didn't give the West Coast farmers any money. 29% of $21.7 billion that was spent between 2018 and 19 to subsidize and provide welfare checks to farmers. 29% went to the West Coast. All this land out here, the Bureau of Land Management can't even manage all the land. And we got the least of everybody. Whereas the South, they barely even have any farmland. Everything is pretty developed down there. They got the most, even though the Midwest has the most production in terms of agricultural commodities. Corn. You think of the corn huskers. Iowa, Nebraska. The South got more than the Midwest. So when you're thinking about voting this year in Ohio, in Michigan, in Iowa, in Nebraska, now you know you got gypped off. He paid his buddies off. You know, the people that were always in behind at those rallies. That's where they got the money to travel. He paid them off. It's a grift. Do you know who's finally awoken to that? Come out of her deep slumber? Somebody I never thought I'd agree with. But it's 2022 and we have a pandemic. And so sometimes you find odd fellows. Ann Coulter now says Donald Trump is the biggest grifter that she's ever seen in her perhaps entire life. And this is saying something because you have to know who Ann Coulter is. Ann Coulter is the person who pretty much nominated Donald Trump to be president of the United States. Nobody thought Donald Trump could win the presidency. And Ann Coulter went on Bill Maher, I recall, and she said there's one candidate that can beat Hillary Clinton. And she said that's Donald Trump. And like a good fortune teller, she was correct. Not for the reason she stated. There was a lot of shadowy things that went on in the empire. Things that we can't divulge. Just know that. Anyway, Ann Coulter said Donald Trump is a grifter. Now, that would mean that most of his supporters are grifters too. Because by now they gotta know that they're grifting. At least the ones that are hawking him in the Congress. You know, the ultra-conservatives. They know. Yet they're attacking us. Why are they still doing that? Let me explain. This is about fascism. A total wipeout of anybody who disagrees with them. And you gotta understand how this starts. It starts by being able to demonize and say the worst things about individuals and groups. You know about QAnon, right? That shit spread like wildfire because it went viral online. And during the pandemic, when everybody was at home and that shit was trending online, a lot of people got baited in. By that time, any reasonable person could have assumed that it was something nefarious going on. But if you're new to the scene of a scam or a grift, you're just hooked because you don't know anything, the background story, so to speak. So that becomes very toxic. And now everybody is a socialist. Black Lives Matter is communist. And you got a president using that rhetoric. And not only just using the rhetoric, physically acting on the rhetoric, physically showing signs of totalitarianism. You're saying, purple people's out. What do you mean? Do you remember when he walked from the White House to the church with the Bible and he held it upside down? There were George Floyd counter-protesters peacefully protesting most of that day in that park. When they found out all of the military police, all of the different governmental branches there, when they got the order that the president was going to have to come through that park to get to the church, they violated everyone's constitutional right when they did that stunt. And everyone that was in that park has a right to sue the United States government, a class action suit for the violation of your First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and redress and protest your government. Donald Trump was the one who began cancel culture. He counseled Colin Kaepernick. And then he walked to the church and held the Bible upside down and counseled your First Amendment right to protest. Now the conservatives saw it a totally different way. They saw it as, oh, those were Antifa and Black Lives Matter, so they don't have a right to speak. You have to agree with us. If you don't agree with us, then you have no right to protest. Keep this in mind because we're going to get to January 6th in a moment. Now, all of those police, law enforcement agents use force against their own citizens who are peacefully assembled. And for what? A photo op of the president holding the Bible incorrectly. Now, he told us that he read that book. He told you a lot of things, but I'm going to go, because this is important. He told you that he read that book. Anybody ever read a book upside down? You know when you're holding a book upside down, especially if you've read it. We never divulge, besides 1619, literature that we've consumed. So you have that, the violation of First Amendment rights. We're witnessing public lynchings all across America. I told you this before, hate crimes were up 400% in this country in 2020, in 1 year. 400% increase in hate crimes. 2,700 hate crimes committed against the African American community alone in 2020. Astronomical number. And not one time did Kellyanne McEnany from the press room talk about the rise in hate crimes, the rise in bigotry in America. No, she showed you a video of a protester in Portland who was upset and said that she hoped that all police officers, I'm not going to repeat what she said. You can go and watch the video. It wasn't nice. This was on the heels of what the police were out there doing to protesters. They've been cited here in Seattle by a federal judge, their own Office of Professional Accountability, and the City Council for violating the rights of the citizens of Seattle here. You should have seen that bullshit that SPD did. I was here, I witnessed it. People, 60,000 strong, protesting, and SPD starts firing tear gas, munitions, rubber bullets. And the patriots, you know, the 3%ers, the oath keepers, they must keep watch, you know. They said nothing. Because they were protesting for Black Lives Matter. And apparently they don't believe that Black lives should matter in this country. You heard what Mitch McConnell said. He said African Americans vote at just as high a rate as Americans. So there's Americans and some other group of people who are just living in the country. And they've been here for how long? 400 years? We're going to talk about February. I made a promise. And I'm now on my word. I'm going to keep the promise. I said if we held our heel, we come swinging down and make them wish they had kept the city's name out their disgusting fucking mouths. And I'm now my word. We're going to come swinging down the hill. It's no longer occupied when I'm addressing you now. But it's occupied now in the present. You say, how can you know what's gonna happen or what is happening? That's an interesting concept. There's a whole way you can know things. Here's the thing, though, that I want to get across to you. We sacrifice. Sure, Tinseltown is going to say, we sacrificed too. And you did. Nobody took more blows, more assaults to our rights, our human rights, than the West Coast. We are well within our right to get everything that this government owes us, because we took the lumps. And Tinseltown is West Coast. So as a coast, we took all the lumps from the fascists in chief. We took the bruisings, the kickings, and you can see it. I remember what this was like before that dictator was elected. When he first started his term, I remember what this was like. And then you look at it now. The destruction that he wrought in his path. Everybody is like, oh, this is Biden's fault. How are you going to blame somebody who took over from something that was a complete shit show and has only been in charge for barely just now a year? Do you do that at your job? Somebody gets fired for doing a bad job of management. You come in and you're supposed to be expected to turn things around in 1 year, and if you don't, then it's your fault. It's not the bad manager that they just fired a year ago. Miss me with the bullshit. Horrible. Horrible job. You gotta sell things. 200 million plus Americans have been vaccinated in 1 year. That's pretty impressive for the federal government. Usually they don't do large scope things like this. 500 million test kits that you can just order over the phone, online. And each American gets 4 test kits. When's the last time the government's done something like that? That scope and magnitude. That lunatic didn't have a plan to distribute the vaccine. His supporters don't even want to do the vaccine or a mask. I talked about this. They want to walk around like it's 1999. That's another difference. They want to dictate that you don't wear a mask. Well, I don't know how you can do that. Because there's such a thing as health and safety. And most jobs are certified by OSHA. If someone is immunocompromised, that's a disability. If you walk around them and you have the virus and you force them not to wear a mask. I talked about this. There will be lawsuits suggesting very shortly in the near future that is either manslaughter or homicide. It's going to be considered one or the other. You cannot do it and think that nobody will ever sue you. We're dealing with stupidity because we have stupid people that can't use logical thinking. We held the hill. Nobody thought that we were going to do it. They riled all of their people up. Oh, I heard the reports of them being out there in the cold with their signs. Recall, 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 marching. I heard reports of them taking out the signs of the recall candidate, stealing signs, defacing signs. Oh, they're nasty wherever you go. Whether it's east, south, west, midwest, central. They're nasty. They're deplorable. But we had the hill, Capitol Taylor Hill, post-occupied Duwamish Capitol Taylor Hill. You know why we say Taylor Hill? We put Taylor there. Taylor united the hill. You see, in 2020, we had somebody from Louisville by the name of Breonna Taylor. And apparently what happened was LMPD, the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department, illegally broke into her housing and lynched her. And this was an EMT worker working 2 jobs in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. Somebody trying to get sleep. And LMPD starts shooting through your apartment. Recklessly. Breaking in. And wouldn't you know, there were nothing but officers out there. Car after car after car. For a tight apartment complex. That's interesting. And they just barge in and start shooting American citizens in Louisville, Kentucky. That's what we were privy to. Capitol Hill protested. They protested blatant racism, blatant hatred. Because we've all been here before. We know how the story goes. We know the ebbs and the flows. We know what happens when you have a sick, demented, lunatic, fascist tyrant as your leader over us. We know what conclusion that comes to. We would allow this opposition to what was happening in this nation. If you can call it a nation. Because they keep saying the United States, but they ought to call it the divided states. You got 19 states passing repressive, suppression, voting laws. You got states attacking individuals because they're transgender, telling them they can't play sports. You got states telling teachers what they can and cannot teach. And of course they don't want to teach anything about, well, American history. They want to teach you Christopher Columbus discovered America. Now I don't know how you can discover something where indigenous people already are residing. Happily, I might add. We won't go for their nonsense. So there was vicious atrocities committed by their lackeys on the West Coast. And believe you me, I know who they are. The Proud Boys, 3%. You see these people, we know. Baby boo, I know. I know you. I know you're sick. Believe you me. When we're done, you'll feel brand new. First they try to intimidate you. They try to force you into their worldview. Their bigotry, their hatred, their rage. And then if they can't force you or intimidate you into it, they'll terrorize you into it. Mental terrorism, physical terrorism. And then if they can't do either one of those, they'll resort to violence, which is their natural tendency. Believe you me, I know. And they tried all three on us. And you know what they say? It's 3 strikes and you're out at the old ball game. We withstood all 3 pitches from those stinking, fucking, disgusting motherfuckers. The wretched of this planet. We withstood that. And they hate us for it. I made a promise that we come swinging down the hill. We know who they are. We know what they did. And there's going to be accountability. I mentioned Breonna Taylor. But I said it should be called Taylor Hill for a reason. It's a uniting hill. Summer Taylor didn't know Duwamish Taylor. They both had the last name Taylor. For nearly 3 months, Summer Taylor occupied a major thoroughfare in this city and was violently murdered in this city, protesting for racial justice in the case of Breonna Taylor. That's why we should call it Capitol Taylor Hill. And that's why it's now post-occupied Capitol Taylor Hill. Thank you. We held the hill. Now we're going to come swinging down the hill. They talk about mercy and countrymen and countrywomen. You don't treat everyone like they belong in this country equally. We know who you are. And we're tired of that bullshit. We've had enough. And if you can't treat everyone equally, then we're not going to treat you equally either. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Seeing as you want to treat other people as otherizing, we're going to otherize you. And like I said before, I enjoy Battleship. It's a very, very, very good game. Learn Battleship. This is a good deal. have to be this way. This is a really good deal. But it's the last fucking deal I'm charitable enough to even offer at this point. I shouldn't be offering shit after what we went through. You should be offering everything to us. And we should be debating which offer is the best. You know what they say? I like to give an offering. So even if it's rejected, and I know that the offer is going to be rejected beforehand, when I do what I have to do, I can at least say, I gave an offering. You can reject it right off the riff if you want to. That's well within your right to do so. Know that I only do offerings once, and it's not out of generosity or kindness. It's out of necessity, actually. I'm not going to tell you why. I keep those type of things to us. It's a good deal. It's a good deal for everybody. It's the best deal. I got the best deal. I did. It's a good deal. Some people will be mad, upset, say that it's biased. It's one-sided. I know what the nonsensical arguments will already be before I even offer the deal. Someone negotiated it with you. Who is this mysterious someone that would have negotiated this deal with Momoa? Sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. This is one of those moments where we're going to see if that phrasing is true or not for the American people. This is a good deal for you. Remember, I'm not east or west. I don't give a fuck, is what that means. This is a good deal for you. For the hemisphere. For the Americas. You know, the Pope said that he wants peace in the Americas. The whole hemisphere. The North, the Central, the South. That's his biggest prayer, is for peace. I'm not religious. I don't pray. But that's a good deal. That's what we want too. But we have to start off at a baseline of understanding about the circumstances we find ourselves in. And that's where people get all tangled up. They're like, oh, well, the circumstances could be because... I don't have time for those type of arguments. One, because they've been argued before. And two, because of what's actually occurred. So, we'll talk about it. I would say clear your schedules for February. Don't have anything scheduled. There's a lot of things that are going to get moving in February. We're going to offer the deal to the nation. It's a good deal. Capital Taylor Hill. Post-occupied Duwamish, Capital Taylor Hill. This is a good deal. I know you fuckers will back the deal. I'm going to need a groundswell army. And I've enlisted you fuckers to back the deal. And I know you will. I know Portland will back the deal. I know a lot of places that'll back the deal. The problem is the opposition. It's going to be fierce to the deal. It's not going to like it. And it's going to initially want to rebuff the deal and say they didn't get a chance to negotiate. You know what my response to that is? Post, Occupy, Duwamish, Capitol, Taylor Hill. My response to that is this. You had a chance to negotiate voting rights. We sat out. We didn't say anything besides it should get done. And then we explained why. But this is after the huge argument that's already ensued. You had a chance to get a deal with criminal justice reform. And you botched it. Months, 90 days of negotiation. And you come before the American people and say you couldn't reach a deal. Negotiations broke down. After George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, you couldn't even do justice by George Floyd. We can't wait for you to do it. We've got to negotiate our own deals. I say this might be the first peer-to-peer deal. It's a good deal for the country. Now, lastly, we've already said they've made us the villain this winter. So, here's the problem. If I'm the person that's doing the deal, of course they're going to villainize the deal maker. Don't get distracted is my biggest and piece of advice. Don't get distracted by any of the players. Only focus on the deal itself. Is the deal good or is the deal bad? Take me out of the equation, whether you hate me or you love me. Take any of the other deal makers out of the equation, whether you hate them or whether you love them. Don't get distracted by the players in the game. Stay focused on the game. Is that deal a good deal or is it a bad deal? That's what it should be judged on. Nobody gets more credit for making the deal and closing the deal than anybody else. Matter of fact, you don't even see me. I'm doing the deal behind your back. All I need is the agreement that it's a legitimate deal. And then I'm going to need one other thing. Suppose we get the deal. It gets agreed upon. But you know, the funny little problem about deals being agreed to is that happens. But then you get people that don't want to abide by the agreement. That happens a lot. And that pisses everybody off. It makes people not even want to offer deals. If you offer a deal and both parties seeing that they didn't gain anything more on the other side, agree to the deal, and then the deal is not done, that pisses people off. It makes us upset too, because we're thinking the deal is done. People have agreed to it. It should be done. A deal's a deal. They always told you that. When you're a little infant, they tell you a deal's a deal. Shake hands on it. pinky promise. Sign on the dotted line. But oftentimes when, and I'm not pointing the finger specifically, but because I reside, I have to bring this up. Oftentimes when you make a deal in this country on the basis of equity, whether it's agreed to or disagreed to, it never gets implemented. I'm not lying. I checked the record. Who's occupied the Duwamish, capital Taylor Hill? We're going to come off the hill charging. We're going to need everything and everybody. Now don't do anything stupid. Don't be a doofus. You got to get through winter. Because summer is going to be interesting too. To say the least. So you got to get through winter. So don't be a doofus. It's my biggest point and takeaway. You know what you need to do. This is not going to be complicated for people that, well, don't like complication. It'll be very simple for you. For the more complicated and task-oriented, you'll enjoy these tasks. You'll find meaning in these tasks. And, well, for us, the deal. Now, remember, poker face. I haven't divulged anything. All I've told you is clear your schedules for February. That's all we're sharing at this point. I told you that they couldn't get it done. They went 0 for 2. They say 3 strikes and you're out at the old ball game. You think I'm going to wait for them to strike out 3 times? And then say, oh, well, why didn't you pull that batter? If I see that a pitcher is better skilled at sizing up that batter, and it's 0-2, and the bases are loaded, and this is for the World Series championship, maybe that pitcher is better with a right-hand batter. So I'm going to switch, call time, get a left-hand batter up at the plate, and send that person out there. Because I feel that I've sized up this pitcher enough to know that they're better at dealing with a right-hander than a left-hander. This is a good deal. I'm not waiting for 3 strikes and you're out at the old ball game. You fuckers can sit there and wait for 3 strikes and you can be out at the old ball game. I don't think you realize what that means. You think shit's bad now. When you're out at the old ball game, there is no more stadium. You're out. We gotta do this. They've been a complete and utter failure. And for no reason. None that I can think of. That would be good for you as a citizen. Did Americans all of a sudden become rich overnight? Did I miss something? Do we not have an unhoused crisis? Are there not people going hungry on our streets, living in encampments? Are hospitals not filled with very ill people? Or is that something that I'm just imagining? Because it would appear that there's a disconnect, a dissonance between what's happening out on the street and what's happening in the Capitol, where they're supposed to be legislating. Maybe we missed something. I don't know. February. Clear your schedules. When it comes swinging down the hill. Don't be a doofus. Know what you're supposed to do. You don't know what to do, don't do shit. This is no time for games. Game time is over. This is the ball game for the World Series. If I know he's 0-2 and he's sized up that batter, best believe I'm putting in the left-handed batter. Best believe it. I'm about victory.